Good evening and welcome to the Yale University Art Gallery. My name is Marlene Theodore. I am the gallery's Jane and Gerald Katcher Curator of Programs. And on behalf of the gallery and the Yale Schwartzman Center, it is my pleasure to introduce this program, a conversation with Okwui, Okpokwasili, Peter Bourne, and Amanda Reid. This program is generously sponsored by the Martin A. Ryerson Lectureship Fund. Thanks everybody for being here. There are many amazing aspects to being on Yale campus. Brilliant artists come to visit and bring in walk-in music and gorgeous videos. The resources are incredible and colleagues are doing fascinating work. So I feel fortunate that I get to collaborate with them. Last February, Jennifer Newman, Associate Artistic Director at Schwartzman Center, invited me to a performance at the Whitney Museum's Edges of Ailey exhibition. This was Okwui and Peter's Let Slip, Hold Sway. I hope many of you were able to experience it and you just saw a glimpse of it in the video. This work was intense, stirring, almost hypnotic, with these percussive shudders that course their way through bodies. I found the work captivating as a durational experience. I also found that for me, it became a lens through which to see the Edges of Ailey exhibition, to re-see works of art, to consider my gaze, who and what I was looking at, how I was looking. It made me think about the edges of art and movement, where their intersection happens and what it awakens. Let Slip, Hold Sway was produced by Sweat Variant, the collaborative practice of Okwui and Peter. Both graduates of Yale, Okwui and Peter actually met here in New Haven and began performing together. Since 1996, they have been working, and I'm going to quote them here, at the intersection of dance, theater, and visual art to make challenging and rigorous work that reaffirms that which has been deemed marginal as the true center through the exploration of Black interiority. They're interested in building a spectacle of radical intimacy in which both performers and audience are acknowledged as being locked in a mutual gaze. They hope to activate a space that allows the audience to question who they're looking at and how they're looking. They hope this creates a critical space of wonderment, of uncertainty, and of mystery, a space where we can see each other anew. And for me, Let Slip, Hold Sway did just that. When Jennifer invited me and other Yale folks to the Whitney for this performance, it was partly in anticipation of a future commission. Schwartzman Center is a lead commissioner on the second part of a trilogy from the artists. So come April, the Yale and New Haven community will have the opportunity to experience this Sweat Variant installation. And this evening, we have a chance to hear directly from Okwui and Peter about their practice, collaboration, teaching, histories, the citing of their work, and big thanks to Amanda Reid for moderating. So now let me introduce our speakers. Okwui is a Brooklyn-based performer, actor, choreographer, and writer. She's earned numerous accolades and has held many artist residencies, including recently at MoMA and at Brown. Peter works as a director, composer, and designer of performance and installation, often in collaboration with Okwui. Their work has been featured internationally, and they have installations in major museum collections. Amanda Reid is an assistant professor of theater and performance at Yale. She's a dance historian who writes and teaches about queer of color critique, West Indian migration, and post-colonial Caribbean Black radicalism. Her writing can be found across dance and theater journals, and she's presently writing a book manuscript. And now I invite our speakers to the stage. Thank you so much.
Put our stuff on. That was so nice. Wow, Marlene.
Yeah, she did that.
She did that. Can we give a hand for Marlene? Whoa. Jennifer, everybody. Okay, I'm sorry. Wow, I had figured this out before. Just a second. This is on tape, right? You're going to be hearing all of the shush, 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 shush.
ASMR.
Yeah,
yes.
ASMR for folks. That's what the young people like these days, we hear, right? You guys like ASMR stuff? Do you do that? No, you don't do that? Why are you all acting like, you know, you never heard about ASMR? Okay, okay.
The audience interaction portion has
I
started.
know, sorry. Sorry. I mean, you're here, we're here, I see you. Okay, so sorry, please.
Guys, we're going to have fun tonight, and I'm so grateful to be able to be here and to chat with both of you together as a longtime fan. And I think it also gives us an amazing opportunity to have a conversation about performance that moves from just the space of performing and putting on a work to also thinking about practice and development. And I think that's important because you guys' work is so iterative. And so we're going to try to move through a lot of, you make it easy to move through a lot of work.
Yes.
Move through time and space with your collaboration. And I also want this conversation to showcase how beautifully, expansively, I think that Sweat Variant theorizes what is performance. My students often tease me, they're like, you think everything's performance. And I feel like you guys are a really good argument for how so many things can sit at the intersection of performance. And you really push the limits of embodiment broadly defined and how we can use it to transform space. So for my first question, I was kind of thinking about that space and the importance of the beautiful score that we heard as we walked in. I'm kind of springing this question on them. But I wanted to ask you about the intro music that we just heard and the mood that you created for us to enter into, both from Peter's point of view as a composer and also from your point of view as a performer.
Peter, do you want to start? Should
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't know if, you know, I feel like the architecture of the space, there has an energy, right? And music, you know, there's a vibrational field that happens with music and the lighting. And often in our work, the piece begins, or I should say, I don't ever think a beginning, we can all be at the same beginning, right? I think that we enter into a space like we've begun somewhere else. So we try to set up the room and we try to set up a vibrational field so that we can all enter, be in the field, and then sort of come to this sort of common, like sort of choose, we come to a common space. We enter into it at our own time, but somehow we finally arrive. And so I feel like we're always trying to set up the room for the arrival. Does that make sense? And so, so I would hope that you're all coming from class, from teaching, from jobs, from I don't know where, and you come into the room and there is a particular lighting design and a sound that allows you to come, take your seat, look at your cell phone, read what you want to read, but then finally, you just choose to settle into being here. And so even in all of our performances, we try to acknowledge that we don't all have a common beginning. We don't have a common starting place, but we can sort of enter a vibrational field and then somehow arrive, and perhaps arrive together. But and so this piece that was playing, the sound, I mean, Peter generates these sonic fields that are quite inspirational to me, and I have been working with that particular soundscape that was playing as we've been developing Adaku Part 2. And I start to build gestural vocabularies. I mean, I just try to stay in a space. We play the sound. You know, I try to stay in it for at least 40 minutes to 50 minutes so that I can start to understand something about the gestural vocabulary that is necessary. And in the piece we're working with, we're thinking about past, future, and present. And we're thinking about what might open up passageways and memories to the past, but also from the, you know, something coming from the future. How can we attune and open up, like on some kind of cellular level? You know, like what can we attune to? So I'm just trying to, I'm reaching for something that is inarticulable in any way for me outside of the body, even though I am trying to write this piece that has to do with recovering fragments of memory from a post-colonial space, but also trying to imagine a future, some future sensation. So anyway, so what you were listening to was the sound that Peter has designed that I've been working with over the last month. Okay, wow, I don't know. That was clear, right? Almost.
Well,
Do you want to talk about that?
yeah, I'll just, am I on? Can you hear me? I'll just add to that, I think in part what we're trying to do in our work is to create a space for relationships to happen that can't happen outside in the ordinary world, right? There's so many social constraints from our bedrooms to everywhere, right? For how we can relate to one another. And so in a way, we're trying to create a container that the performers can enter into, that the audience can enter into. And first of all, that relationship can be different than anywhere else, right? It's like, this is kind of a poor example of it, you know, because we're still in an auditorium and we still have this kind of seating arrangement. But for instance, like with this piece, it was a 3-hour durational piece, and the doors were open and the audience was allowed to come and go as they pleased, right? And so the idea that Okwui was speaking about earlier of when do you become an audience member? Like when do you decide, like you could come in and sit down and not pay any attention at all, right? And so it's like, in the work that we do, we normally, the minute you come in, there's something happening, right? As if it's been happening for a long time, because for us, it has been, right? So, for instance, there's this piece called Bronx Gothic, right? And in this piece, Okwui was in the corner of the room, right? Just moving the whole time. The audience would come in, and she's moving, very intense. It was called a quake or a twerk gone wrong.
Yes.
And then, but as you came in, you know, it's like the audience convention to come into a show is you come in and you like your program. And then the lights go down and you're like, okay, and now I know it's my time to turn the attention here, right? But I think that was one of the first times we're trying to upend that and be like, we're all in this room together, and your presence is important to me. You know, it's not you're not just here to be a spectator. You're here to be a participant, right? First of all, with your energy, right? It's like at some point during that show, everyone, their attention turned to that person in the corner.
At some point.
And they became part of that energetic loop between the performer and the audience. But all that to say is that, yeah, the sound, the lights, the environment, the seating arrangement of the relationship between the audience and the performers, and ultimately for the performers, right? How to create a container with all those elements that the performers walk into it and they're not like, I'm here to perform for you, but they're like, oh, this is a space that I can go somewhere in.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't go to church to perform. You go to church because it's like, this helps me go somewhere.
For some.
You know, for some people.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's that similar kind of experience. Like, how do we create a space that helps us all like go somewhere?
Go somewhere. Yeah.
I'm also, I mean, I'm going to be jumping all around with questions because y'all's are cooking. But I'm thinking too about how you use duration and time to do that for us. For Oakley, I went back and watched a bunch of your old interviews, so which would be my worst nightmare if some were to do. But I was watching a really beautiful conversation you had with Sadia Hartman.
Oh, I love Sadia.
And you were talking about duration performance as a way to access multiple sensory openings, which made me think too about the way that you think about the body as porous, but also the different points of access, right? And so the more that we sit and we see, the more we can access the body as kind of a bridge or a portal to otherwise sonic, vibrational, spatial, architectural experiences. So when we're working, as you guys often do in a museum or places that have a heavy choreography of how you should move, how you should see, how do you use sound, all these kind of affordances, but also time, different senses of time to help us kind of disrupt how we move through this space and to enter into the work in a way that is generative and new.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things about a number of museums is now, you know, they've had like MoMA and the Whitney, they had these major renovations, and so they actually made specific spaces for performance, right? And so in a way, I feel that we've usually gone into museums and been able to use spaces that they've laid out and made for us. But the special thing is that we can shape the architecture of the space, right? We're not locked into a particular architectural design, so we have that freedom, and we kind of take advantage of the particular kind of ethos that the museum already has, which is people moving in and out of the space. And so so we allow that, but then we take full advantage. And Peter, especially, he is the design genius. And you know, so with the sonic design and the architectural design, we just it's and the light, you know, to try to make these spaces so that you can come in, and once you come in, we can kind of like, you know, so I feel like, but it would be interesting because I'm thinking we've never really used a museum space. What would it be like to use a museum space that had set up its own, where there was another exhibition that we had to somehow encounter or collide with? Actually, we did. Sorry, I'm just remembering. We did something, was it at Mass MoCA when Nick Cave had that
that's right.
huge exhibition, and it felt, and he invited, or was it, yeah, he invited a number of performance folks, mostly dance folks, to come in and have an intervention with the space. And the Nick Cave space felt, I went in there and I immediately felt like I was in the Bush of Ghosts, or what is the Amos Tutuola novel. Some of you, if any of you know, also David Byrne and is it Brian Eno, who did My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, based on this Amos Tutuola novel that was so excellent because it was written in Pidgin English. And so unlike Chinua Achebe, who was definitely sort of writing to sort of, you know, be a narrative, you know, in the Western canon from like a very specific Nigerian perspective, to think about a post, like the colonial impact on narrative. Amos Tutuola was kind of radically insisting on the language of the people that, you know, he wasn't interested in translating for an American or a Western audience, right? Using Pidgin English, dropping us into the bush of Nigeria that holds all of these, this bush is like, holds all of these mythologies. This is the place where in Igbo culture, you would put things into this forest that were taboo. It was the place where the line between the living and those who had gone on before you was most porous, and you could fall into, you know, wandering through this bush, you could fall into, you know, a space out of time. And anyway, so this book is so incredible. And when we went into this Nick Cave space, I felt like I was in that bush. And so it was like, oh, I feel like he made a space that we would make, or maybe it was a bit more full and maximalist than what we might do. But yeah, that was pretty intense. Okay, that was a little bit of a diversion, but in general, we do go into these museum spaces where they have allocated, you know, room for performance, because I think that they are trying to account for bodies within the canon and the history, particularly of contemporary art, and how bodies have been in these major collaborations and these conversations with visual artists. I mean, Judson Church, Fluxus, all of these folks, and I think we have an incredible crop of performance curators who are trying to surface that history and acknowledge it, account for it, and see where it's going now.
Well, just to speak a little bit about the idea of duration, which I think also kind of ties in a little bit to what I was speaking about earlier of creating the space for something unexpected to happen, right? One of the tools that we like to use both in the creation space and the choreographic space is duration, because, we're so, again, we're so programmed by time, right? Like we're the 3-minute song with the bridge in the middle, we're so used to certain time periods built into our body. It's like going with duration. How do you break out of that, and how do you release yourself into something else which is unknown, not into and because that is such an important part of our work, the work is, I mean, all performance is obviously time-based, right?
Yeah.
But when you're sitting through something for 3 hours, then you're really like, okay, yeah, this is time, right? This is, and so when we were asked to do this piece for the new museum, that was a performance piece, and it was a part of the late Okwui and Wazir's one of his final
Yeah, the
curatorial
posthumous,
shows, and it was supposed to be this performance, but then COVID hit, and they're like, oh well, we don't know if you can do a performance in here. Can you guys do something else? And so we kind of embarked on creating installations that can embody a performance without a performer being there.
Yeah.
And so part of that is that it takes time. You can't just come in and, like, you can come in and spend 10 minutes with a painting and feel good about that, or spend 30 seconds, really, But, if you come into something where you have to, it's not even just the video, right? It's the whole installation takes time to experience, right? So that changes, I think, the museum experience a little bit for me.
Yeah. You're aware that you're entering into something that has been already going on and
Yes.
that will continue after you.
Yes, and it's like you can decide, when do I tap in? It's like, when does your neuron, like some kind of axon or, for your neuronal network start to like decide, okay, I'm gonna go onto that, or attach to that, and then build a new, start to spider out into more, branch out into even more sensational, more sensation-grabbing branches. How does it do that? I mean, because I think also we can all decide, like there's a way that I want to acknowledge that we're making a decision to sit here and to listen. And I don't want to assume that the minute you come into the room that you've made that decision already, and I want to give you time. I want everyone to take their time to make that decision. And also as a performer, and I tell when I'm working with performers, I always say, how do we get past that point where you don't have the energy to do anything interesting, right? Where you're not trying to be interesting, but you stay interested, and so how, what does that take? And we have frameworks, and we have scores, and we think about repetition, and then there's repeating something, but then breaking down the thing you're repeating, right? Like you think you have a gesture that's like this, but then you think, okay, so if I repeat this, boom, I'm repeating, and then it's like all of a sudden, but wait a minute, what are the sort of incremental, so you thought this was the beginning, right? And you thought this was the end. What if, when you get here, there are all of these things that can happen before you get to that end? I like to think of like all of the interstitial spaces that might open up and give you some, I don't know, lead you into different directions. So what you thought was the end isn't the end. And I'm saying thought, and I don't mean just this thought. I mean like the whole body thinking. Like what is the whole capacity? What is this? How is the skin thinking, or the side body, the side of the arm thinking, and what is it, and how is it being? How is that thought? What is the impulse for that thought? What is the inspiration for that thought? And maybe it's sound. Maybe all of a sudden you have a sense of wind and air moving. You feel a wind or an energy moving your arm, and that's the thing that helps you think through what that journey of gesture is. I just feel like there's so much happening all of the time as a living body. I don't know about you guys, but I feel that.
Let's get into the body and the body's
All right,
possibilities.
we're
Let's
in the
get deep
body.
in. And I think this can kind of open us too for some folks who want to hear a little bit more about the long journey of your collaboration. Right?
Yeah.
So, in another old interview, I'm sorry. Wait.
That's okay. I'm half listening. I'm sorry. No, I'm totally fully listening. I'm here. I can handle it. I can manage
You got
this.
it. You got this.
Yeah, I got this.
You were talking about how you were a little hesitant to call yourself an artist.
Oh,
In
yeah.
a moment. And to me, and it was because you don't work, and maybe it's because you live with someone who
Yeah, I
works with,
feel like Peter
with
is very much the
the
artist.
plastic arts and
Yeah.
has this kind of practice rooted in sculpture and sound, right?
Yeah.
But to me, this was funny because I think you are so skilled in manipulating the body, both of you guys together, as kind of this fleshy, very sweaty,
Yes.
noisy,
Yes.
textured surface.
Yes.
From a surface that has a lot of possible prosthetics, like the texture of hair, the texture, all that kind of stuff. Even a screen for projection, as we saw. I think was that.
That was my back. Yeah.
Yeah, that was your back. And of course, Peter, you work with sound and sculpture, and you kind of blend those practices. I mean, you are someone who's now working with the body and has worked with the body. You guys are both
Yeah.
theater kids.
Yeah, we're theater kids. Yeah.
So I want to kind of think about from, some of the hallmarks of early in your collaboration, or the kind of, I guess, like finished work, things like Pent Up or Bench Dance or Bronze Gothic. How were you thinking about working with the body as material then, and how has that kind of expanded or morphed in your work? I know that's a kind of big question.
It's a very big question. I do want to say that I've claimed the artist title now. I just feel I just feel very I get very uncomfortable with titles, and I don't know why. I mean, I have to use titles to apply for grants all of the time, but I guess I don't want to be stuck anywhere. I want the freedom. Like, I work a lot with sound. A lot of the work I start with stories and writing and research, and but I think maybe my hesitancy was that, art is about a kind of my idea of art was a kind of visual art, was in a visual art framework that had to do with this object that was outside of you, and that maybe there was this possibility for a kind of this interface, but it's something. Somehow in private you do this thing, and you do whatever machinations, and you rely on all of the tools that you have to create an object that reflects a kind of whatever concern you have, whether it's with a particular, I don't know, style, subject, and it just felt too, disembodied, right? And working with a body, and the idea of the labor, the ongoing labor over time, and even the deterioration of the body that's producing that labor, the sensation, like the sweat accumulating on the body, and that work is so important to me, and I want it to be valued. And in some ways, maybe I felt a little alienated from art spaces in the way that it was hiding the labor, or the labor wasn't the thing that was valued. I mean, obviously, you look at things, and they, you look at Wall's text, and they talk about maybe the conceptual concerns, and they're very interested in the materiality of the object, right? This is gouache, and it was using all of these things about the material, and I just, maybe I felt a little bit alienated by that, but I think yeah, I'm now okay with claiming that and insisting that there is a particular labor, art labor, creative labor, craft labor, and it's being exposed. That's okay. That is an art. That's an art. Yeah, sorry. It's like I don't know. You, sir.
Uh, um, I mean, I was thinking back, and I don't know, to part of your question, which was it. Well, how have things changed over the years,
And
maybe?
I think also for you, it could be, I mean, you are someone who now also like teaches performance, right? So how has the body also re-entered in new ways through this collaboration, your own process?
I mean, I feel like my own personal journey has gone. I mean, I've been super fortunate that the first few pieces that I worked on were with Okwui, right? Who just to the I don't want to say choreography, I'll say movement, to the movement of things just brings a lot of imagination, let's say, right? So from the very beginning, I saw my role as like, well, she's inside of it and experiences it in that way, and I'm outside of it and I experience it in that way, right? And how do we both experience something together, right? And how do I not prioritize like, oh, that's a great image, do that,
Yeah.
right? But instead be like, what were the circumstances that gave rise to that amazing thing that happened, right?
Right.
And how do we create those circumstances again? Maybe the same thing will happen, but maybe not, right? And 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 so as we've grown from just solo pieces to multi-person pieces, I feel like I was already primed to be like, okay, the people in it are the resources, right? I don't have to be like, do this, do this, do this, right? I can come in and be like, okay, here's an exercise where we're all gonna create this structure, and within that structure, create some vocabulary, and then learn that vocabulary, and then so it's really. I feel like my role is like, well, how do I create again containers or structures or sounds or lights or environments where people can come in and be like, okay, oh yeah, it's kind of intuitive now what I should do in this space, and then you don't have to give me any movement, right? And counterintuitively, there is no outside eye, right? It doesn't matter for you. It doesn't matter what it should look like, right?
Sometimes it does.
You know,
I mean, it's,
but just the idea that the performer, part of the performer's job is not to be like, okay, am I pleasing you?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
The performer's job is I'm going somewhere, you're helping me, we're going there together, maybe, but it's not about am I getting the right side to you or anything.
Right. I mean, just it's also the porosity question, right? It's like how I kept thinking about ways that we're trying to access each other. It's almost like how do we open and how do we soften? And sometimes, I grew up in the United States, Black woman, African American, Igbo woman, and there were ways that I was trained to really protect myself and to really not sort of project a kind of vulnerability, especially growing up in the Bronx in the 70s and 80s. And also, then there came a point where I started to feel, oh, and people also project onto me a kind of hardness, right? And there's a way that, I was aged before I was older, that I was treated a particular way just because, just there are certain things assumed about me as a Black woman. And so I realized that somehow in performance, there is a space of how do you open, and when we bring performers into the room, how do we open? What are the exercises and what's the work that we can do that allows people to be deeply grounded and journey within themselves while also still having that sensation of porousness, so sort of being open to receiving what's coming into you from outside, right? And Catherine Profeta and I have been talking about this, and I think maybe you may have been in this conversation too, around the body weather practice. And this idea, and it's not only the body weather practice, I feel like there are so many, like within sort of the African American kind of like cultural like landscape and conversation around not necessarily being a singular body, not being one, right? That, you know, that you're always somehow at the intersection of like multiple bodies moving through you, right? That you emerge from a kind of, you're like a nodal point in that multiplicity, right? And so there's something in performance that I feel is most exciting when you can sort of be in that active vibrational nodal field, you know, where there's just, yeah, or a sensational field that acknowledges that that you're not one body, right? Or that you're both one and many. And in some way to also honor that when we're working with multiple people, to somehow honor the ways that we are entangled with each other. And so even in our movement practice, there are often, and Catherine is who's our dramaturg and has been for the last couple of pieces, in the movement, you know, there are just a couple of things I ask people to do, and often I when people are duetting, I'd ask about, can we find points of contact? Can you trace points of contact? But not like with the end of the hand, but try to find like the moment where the back of your head is the front of somebody's neck, or you know, your belly to belly, belly to back. What are the ways that we can touch each other in our most vulnerable and soft places, and travel with each other and trust each other, and let it become somehow dangerous and fraught, but then not, right? Like what are these like passageways, openings? I was, you know, porosity, porous, right, comes from what? The Latin for, what is it, porous, right? That's supposed to be like an opening, right? A passageway. Also ancient Greek, what is it, poro? I think that might also be opening. No, that's passageway. Anyway, the point is, I'm like always looking for these points, these passageways, these openings that we can connect to with our partners. And it's really exciting, and it can be, yeah, it can be thrilling and frightening. But in that way, I'm not always looking at what does it look like, but I am seeing, oh, what is a connection point that feels like it's a passageway point.
A crossroads.
Yes, a crossroads through each other. And sometimes I feel like, and Peter too, we feel like we can see it. I mean, we set up Peter designs these sound fields, and we might, you know, say a couple of things like, okay, here are some of the things, just think about these connection points, da-da-da-da-da. Try to, you know, in a lot of dance, people have their negative space and they really try to navigate that. And we're always like, get even closer, and find those connections in those soft spaces. And then we just let people go for like 40 minutes. And it's interesting. It's interesting. And then we do videotape it, and sometimes it's true. We are like, okay, this connection, da-da-da-da-da, how do we find a way back to that connection? And we name it. And then those are some strategies.
Looking at our time, I
Sorry.
both want to open up space for, to hear some of that sonic field.
Sure.
Oh,
Let's,
thank you.
well, just quickly, yeah.
Yeah,
Just-
and then we'll, yeah,
And then we'll open it up to other questions.
yeah.
So to build on what Okwui was saying, you know, and you know, when you're doing stuff, you don't often know what you're doing. You're just doing it. You're listening. You're feeling, right? But then afterwards, you're like, oh, well, what was I doing? And is there is there a method to it that I can think about in the future? And so the thing I've been thinking a lot about is the idea of confluence. And confluence being almost like, I mean, you could say a river, but that's a little messy, but almost like two people who are walking, and every now and then they meet, and then they're walking and they meet, and they're walking and they meet, right? And this person's walking slowly, and this person's walking fast, but they're walking in a circle, and so how the pattern, it always changes of the meeting places, right? Normally we think of alignment, right? We think of like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to play on 1 and 3, and you're going to play on 2 and 4, right? And so those are going to be our meeting places, right? But if we think, okay, well, you're going to be doing whatever you're going to be doing, and you're going to be doing whatever you're going to be doing, and every now and then we're going to have a convergence, right? And so, and I'm just going to go quickly through this, but just think of convergence in two ways. One, it would be like a rhythmic convergence, right? Like two rhythmic ideas come together and they seem to meet or butt up against each other, but somehow they're not 1, 3, 2, 4. And then the other idea being a convergence of harmonics, right? Like let's say this piece of music is in this key, and this piece of music is in the same key, but they're two different instruments, so they have two different timbers at the same time. Or this is in this key, and this is in another key completely, a different key completely, and they both share the same note G. So every now and then, they have a convergence, right? So I brought along a little example of that to think about.
This is show and tell, everybody. Love it.
All right, so and these are all, little samples that are a couple seconds long that have been manipulated in some way and repeated. And it also, I've been thinking about how do you repeat something with that is recorded and have it be a live event, right? And where it's not the same every time. So these, we'll just go through the samples first. So here's the first sample. Let's see. You might recognize it from Nina Simone's Thinner Man. Here's the second sample. This is a sample from Rahsaan Roland Kirk song called 3 in 1. Right? So both have kind of a very distinct rhythmic idea going on. So then thinking about, okay, now we have this rhythmic idea. What are some harmonic ideas that can fit in there? So here's one, and that, it's a piano that can kind of comes in there a little bit with the Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And the harmonics are, you can hear they're not, maybe one of them is, you would say, oh, that's out of tune, right? And the piano is slightly pitchy, right? But instead of thinking of that, thinking of like, okay, the harmonics of the whole thing now is expanded to be both pitchy and not pitchy. So that you lose the sense of what does pitchy even mean anymore. And then thinking, okay, what's another harmonic structure you can add in there? And then, okay, now we're going to put them all together and we'll see. Is this
Yeah.
little, how does the confidence work? You know, is it gonna, I don't know.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I mean, that's the landscape.
Yes, the
And
landscape. Yes, the
so
landscape
that's
idea.
what I get the privilege to play within in our rehearse, and also the performers to play within in our rehearsals. And then, of course, and then sometimes I start to build songs through those landscapes, and it's super exciting.
There's
Thank
so
you,
many
Peter.
different
That was.
invitations to move through that. Yeah.
Say that again. So
There's
many.
so many invitations to move through that.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
So many different.
That's what it is, right? It's invitations to move through, invitations to move through that. I feel like it's the bush,
Mm.
it's the forest. Yeah. Yeah.
And you will be inviting Yale students to be.
Yes, because I'm working on a particular kind of chorus. We're working on a particular chorus, which will be a secret. But if you can come, please join
Unless
us.
you come. then it
Unless you
won't
come,
be a
then it won't be a secret.
So I'm kind of looking towards the back to gesture towards if we have time for a question. Yeah, I think we have time for a question or two from the audience. We just ask that you raise your hand and let the microphone come to you so that it will be caught on the recording and so we can all hear you.
That was so nice, Peter. Thank you. Is that Nancy?
Hi, such a pleasure to have you on campus. Thank you for being here. You've spoken about the landscape of sound and also the way the movement comes about through deep listening, thinking about patterns, repetition, diverging, coming back together. Something that has struck me from years of attending performances, some of the work in progress, the first time I saw your work was for People's Television at BAM.
Oh.
And what struck me in that piece was how the lighting worked. And that always captivates me whenever I see productions. The image in the background has got all of this reflection with the mirrors, and the light is being used there to double and multiply, or also bring the audience and the performers together in different ways. Can you speak about light, how you're working with light, how you see it as a material, or is it doing something else? You talked about the forest in the Tutola, and in the forest, light is playing, we're seeing light manifest in so many different ways. And I wonder if that informs how you think about lighting the pieces, or if there's some other way that you've come to being so masterful with that mechanism.
The thing that I have grown to really be attached to is the idea of a source. Like, if you have theatrical lighting that's magical, and you can see it, it's there because you want to see something. It doesn't create an emotion, right? Sure, you can see things properly, right? And you can maybe see the movement properly, but for me, so as we've progressed, obviously we work in theaters mostly, so you need to use theatrical lights anyway to bolster everything. But whenever I can, I'd like to have you can have a bulb hanging here, and you'll see the source of the light, so that it has a relationship to everything, right? This light has very little relationship apart from bad relationships, like things that, I mean, like whenever I walk into a theater, it really it evokes nostalgia for me, because it's like when I was a child, and the magic of the theater. But that's not really what I want when I come into a theater space. I want, as I said earlier, kind of this a place that you can't have anywhere else, right? And so allowing, so taking that first rule of like, okay, you always want to see the source of light, but then you want to think of, I don't like the idea of light as a character, but I think light as something that has a definite relationship to what, let's say, Okwui as a person is doing, right?
Yeah.
It shifts
Yeah,
what
like a dynamic relationship.
Okpui's character is, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like how to bring everything into relationship, into some kind of dynamic relationship, right? And not just have it so that you can see everything, but like, what is the sensation that it's, what is it, you know what I mean? Like, what is it tapping at? How is it touching you and entering you, or making you feel more enveloped or more connected with the people next to you or the people in front of you? It's just, and sometimes you just understand the feeling of that. It's like, when you came into this room, I was like, okay, can we just not have it so light? Maybe everything doesn't need to be visible, or maybe I think about in the Western sense or cosmology, like we're taught to rely so heavily on what we see, right? And vision is the thing that allows us to not to sort of order everything and value everything. And there's this incredible scholar who talks about the world view in the Western sense, and then there are other spaces and other cosmologies that are thinking of a world sense, like what are you smelling, what are you feeling, what are you hearing, So I just think that light is in a dynamic interplay with all of that. So maybe it's not a character, but it's a thread, in this some kind of great weave that we're in, I think. Thank you, Nancy.
Can we do, okay, great. We can do another question.
I don't. Sorry.
Hello, thank you, all three of you, so much for this program. My question relates to the theme of the porous, which has come up a lot this evening, the idea of porous boundaries between disciplines, or as you alluded to, Peter, the idea of this porous relationship where Okwui is inside something and you are outside of something. And I wondered if the two of you could give us a bit of insight into what that's like to be collaborators and to talk about that porous boundary between your work as collaborators.
I have to say that I'm often also on the outside.
Okay, well, I'd love to hear.
Right.
About
I mean, I think that I play the inside and outside. I have sometimes demanded that Peter, who's a peeper? Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. I'm regretting that last cortado. But Peter is sometimes I've demanded I was like, okay, you get in there and you do that for, for 15 minutes. And it's been interesting because maybe there's a way that sometimes I'm thinking, oh, Peter needs more inside, right? But I feel like I'm inside. I don't know. I'm inside and outside, whatever that. Because we're videotaping things, so I'm looking at things and I'm trying to see if I can, the place that I was inside. So often I will do something for 40 minutes or something, and then I will get out and I'll take notes to myself, and I'll try to sort of remember some of the things that I started with, where I went, what the feeling was, and then I'll look at it and I'll try to just mark what I'm seeing and how those two things are in relation. And then in working with other people, I'm sitting out and I'm looking from out, but I'm asking them, what happened to you, or where were you going, or so I do try to mark that. And then I'm also with Peter, he'll play something that he has designed, and I will say, please change that, because I can't go anywhere in that landscape, so that I'm back inside. Anyway, so I toggle back and forth.
Well, I think, it's, as Okwui said, every now and then, I try to jump in there and be like, "Bleh." But as I reminded, I'm like, nobody really wants to see me do that.
I mean, I do.
I will be happy to do that, but,
Is this on film? Is this been recorded?
There's stuff we.
I mean, but I think of it more as somebody who is trying to, I guess I'm never trying to communicate with the people in the piece by saying, okay, now do like this. Every now and then I will be like,
You do that sometimes.
every now and then, but
Can you just
I'll be
do
like,
this?
but you know what I mean. You guys know what I mean.
And then we'll be like,
Yeah.
no, what do you mean? Please show us.
I'll be like, well, what you just did, not this, but you did it.
Hey,
I think it's that, and maybe this is the audience member who would not step on stage and be like, okay, I'm going to jump on stage with you all and do it, versus Okwui is the audience member who's like, okay, guys, if you get cooking enough, I'll get in there with you,
I mean, because it's not even, it's so interesting, because it's not about even virtuosity, because I'm not interested in virtuosity, but I am interested, again, in that porousness. Like, how much can you open? How much can you soften? How much can be available to you? And, and so I'm like, I think Peter can do that. He can, and he has.
I guess, too, I'm thinking about how your work remains as online as an archival project that's constantly being, even the way that you create the imagery, constantly being reimagined in constellation with each other and with different work. So it feels like the porousness, there's multiple points of entry that keep on going,
Yes.
even with outside the live performance, but
Yes.
as the work is being reconfigured as you're making it.
Yeah, I mean, and recently, because of the piece that we mentioned earlier that was in the museum, somebody was like, hey, why don't you bring that to Korea, and we'll give you a gallery show in Korea. And so we were like, okay, we'll do that, and we'll come up with some other, visual arts pieces.
Right. But it is like this constant back and forth, inside, outside. Peter will design a space, and I will enter it and try to sort of suss out, oh, this has a particular energetic field. Let's Lip Hold Sway, the piece that was at the Whitney as part of the Edges of Ailey. Like, I looked at that spiral and the disc above with the ocean, the Atlantic, almost as the sky, as the future, the sort of red, the rust red circle below as almost like a clay that seemed to harken back to the southeastern villages of my family in Nigeria. And and then the spiral, and the design of it, I just understood, what the work was to enter into that space. I understood it as being haunted and held between a past and the future. And And so sometimes Peter's designs, immediately, I walk in and I know. And it's funny, my tongue is a blade, which is this, with the mirrors that are reflecting the audience, sort of bringing the audience into shifting relationships with the performers. I still have questions about it because we're also, we come out of it and we spin. It's like it feels almost Sisyphean, it feels this. And so sometimes there are ways that like I step in and out in that way, right? I'm like, okay, I understand it. And then sometimes I don't understand it. And I'm like, well, what is it doing, And sometimes I feel like I don't know that I want it to be doing the thing that it's doing. But sometimes I'm like, but then I kind of like colliding against the thing that I don't want and I don't understand. So it's constantly like, okay, yeah. I know you all understood that, right? Totally. Thank you.
I think that our time might be up.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jen.
Thank you to Jen.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you to our incredible tech crew, Liz, Carl,
Thank
Milan, Doug.